The stars looked different this far from Earth. Captain John Pierce stood on the bridge of the USS Valiant and watched the view screen show him a universe he barely recognized. They had been out here for 3 months, mapping new systems and looking for planets that humans might one day call home. So far, they had found rocks and gas and empty space. Nothing special. Nothing dangerous. That changed when the sensors started screaming. Lisa Grant looked up from her station, her face going pale. She was the first officer, second in command of the whole ship. Pierce trusted her more than anyone else in the crew. When she looked scared, everyone else should be terrified. "Captain, we have multiple contacts. 5 ships. They just appeared out of nowhere." Pierce felt his stomach drop. "What do you mean, appeared? They didn't travel here, sir. They just materialized. Some kind of faster-than-light technology we don't have." The view screen changed to show the 5 ships. They were huge, each one twice the size of the Valiant. Their hulls were dark and covered in what looked like armor plating. Weapons bristled from every surface. These were warships, built for killing. "Try to contact them," Pierce said. His voice was steady, even though his heart was racing. "Maybe they're friendly." Lisa worked her console and sent out a greeting in every language Earth knew. She added mathematical sequences, universal constants, anything that might show they came in peace. The response came 30 seconds later. It was not friendly. The alien voice was deep and harsh, like gravel grinding against metal. It spoke in a language the computer couldn't translate, but the tone was clear enough. This was a threat, a demand. The message played 3 times and then stopped. Lieutenant Paul Hayes looked back from the weapons station. He was young, barely 25, but he had good instincts. "Captain, their weapons are charging. I'm reading massive energy signatures. Shields up, battle stations." Pierce hit the ship-wide alert. Klaxons blared through every corridor. The crew had 90 seconds to get to their positions. They would need every one of those seconds. The computer finally cracked part of the alien transmission. Words appeared on the screen in front of Lisa. She read them out loud, her voice shaking slightly. "Submit, surrender, obey. 1 rotation to comply." "What's a rotation?" Hayes asked. "Probably their version of a day," Lisa said. "Maybe 20 hours. Maybe 30. We don't know." Pierce made a decision that would change human history. "Send them this message. We are explorers from Earth. We claim no territory here. We wish only to pass through, in peace." The aliens responded faster this time. The computer translated most of it. "Earth. Unknown. Irrelevant. You are in Zalkar space. Surrender or die." So they were called the Zalkar. At least now Pierce had a name for the enemy. He looked at his crew. 43 people who had signed up to explore the stars, not fight a war. They were scientists and engineers, pilots and doctors. None of them had expected this, but every single one of them was looking at him with determination in their eyes. They were scared. Of course they were scared. But they were also ready. "We need time to think about this," Pierce transmitted. 24 hours. The Zalkar response was immediate. One of their ships fired. A beam of bright plasma cut through space and hit the Valiant's shields. The whole ship shook. Lights flickered. Someone screamed in the corridor outside. "Shields at 60%, Hayes reported. "That was a warning shot. If they hit us with everything they have, we'll last maybe 2 minutes." Kate Morrison's voice came through from engineering. She was the chief engineer, the person who kept the Valiant running. "Captain, I can give you speed or I can give you shields. Not both. The power systems can't handle full load." Pierce did the math in his head. If they ran, the Zalkar would chase them. Those ships were faster and better armed. If they fought, they would lose. But if they surrendered, Earth would never know what happened out here. Humanity would keep sending ships into space, blind and ignorant, until the Zalkar came to Earth itself. That could not happen. Kate, give me shields. Paul. Target their lead ship. Aim for the engines if you can. Sir, Lisa said quietly. We can't win this fight. No. Pierce agreed. But we can make them remember us. And we can get a message back to Earth. Send a data burst. Everything we've learned about these ships, their weapons, their language. Send it now. Maximum power. Straight back home. Lisa's fingers flew across her console. Sent. It'll take 6 weeks to reach Earth. But it's away. Well, Alozam. Well, Am Consolm. The Zalkar fired again. This time, all 5 ships opened up at once. The Valiant's shields lit up like a star as plasma beams hammered into them from every direction. The ship groaned and twisted. Metal screamed. People were thrown from their seats. Shields at 20%. Hayes shouted over the noise. Return fire, Pierce ordered. The Valiant's railguns spun up and launched solid metal slugs at incredible speed. They were primitive compared to the Zalkar plasma weapons. But they were all Pierce had. The slugs crossed the distance in seconds and impacted on the lead Zalkar ship's shields. Nothing happened. The alien shields absorbed the impact without even flickering. Again, Pierce said. Keep firing. They fired until the railgun barrels glowed red hot. They fired until the Zalkar shields finally started to show strain. It took 60 shots to do what one plasma beam did to the Valiant. Shields gone, Hayes said. Next hit goes straight through. All power to engines, Pierce commanded. Kate, I need everything you've got. The Valiant's engines roared to life. The ship leaped forward, accelerating hard enough to make the crew feel twice their normal weight. Pierce aimed for the asteroid belt that surrounded this system. It was dense and chaotic, full of rocks ranging from pebbles to mountains. The Zalkar followed. They were faster. But Pierce was willing to take risks. They weren't. He flew the Valiant between asteroids that were only meters apart. He used the gravity of larger rocks to slingshot around corners. He made the ship dance through a field of debris that should have torn them apart. Behind them, one of the Zalkar ships clipped an asteroid and spun out of control. It crashed into another rock and exploded in a ball of fire and metal. First blood to humanity. But the other 4 kept coming. Paul, Pierce said. How many nuclear missiles do we have? 12, sir. They're meant for mining operations, not combat. Can you detonate them remotely? Hayes caught on immediately. Yes, sir. Do it. Plant them throughout this asteroid field. Hide them behind rocks. In craters. Anywhere the Zalkar won't see them. Until it's too late. For the next 10 minutes, the Valiant raced through the asteroids, dropping nuclear mines like breadcrumbs. The Zalkar followed, their ships larger and less maneuverable. They were being funneled exactly where Pierce wanted them. When all 12 mines were in place, Pierce turned the Valiant around. The ship faced the 4 Zalkar vessels head-on. It looked like surrender. It looked like the humans had nowhere left to run. The Zalkar closed in for the kill. Now, Pierce said. Hayes triggered all 12 mines at once. The asteroid field lit up with nuclear fire. Explosions bloomed in the darkness, each one as bright as a sun for just a moment. Rocks shattered and became shrapnel. The shockwaves hit the Zalkar ships like hammers. 2 more ships died. They were torn apart by the combined force of nuclear detonations and asteroid impacts. Debris scattered across space in expanding clouds of metal and gas. The remaining 2 Zalkar ships survived, but they were damaged. One was venting atmosphere. The other had lost its weapons. Pierce didn't wait. He fired every remaining weapon the Valiant had. Railgun slugs, missiles, even the point defense lasers. Everything. The wounded Zalkar ships retreated. They jumped back into faster-than-light travel and disappeared, leaving their dead behind. The Valiant drifted in space, barely functional. 14 crew members were dead. The hull had breaches on 6 decks. Life support was failing in engineering. But they had won. Pierce slumped in his chair, suddenly exhausted. Lisa was crying quietly at her station. 4. Hayes was staring at his console like he couldn't believe what had just happened. In engineering, Kate was already shouting orders to her team, trying to keep the ship alive long enough to get home. They had met an alien race. They had fought a battle. They had killed and been killed. And somewhere, out in the darkness, those 2 surviving Zalkar ships were heading home with a message of their own. Humanity would fight. The message from the Valiant took 6 weeks to reach Earth. When it arrived, it changed everything. Admiral Henry Cross was in his office at the Space Defense Headquarters when the alert came through. He was an old man, gray-haired and tired, but his mind was still sharp. He had spent 40 years preparing Earth's defenses against threats that might never come. Now, one had. He called an emergency meeting. Within 3 hours, every important person in Earth's government and military was gathered in the command center. On the screens around them played the footage from the Valiant's encounter. They watched in silence as the human ship fought and somehow survived against impossible odds. When the video ended, no one spoke for a long moment. Finally, Ambassador Claire Hughes broke the silence. She was responsible for Earth's diplomatic relations, though until now, that had only meant talking to other humans. We need to reach out. Find other species. Build alliances. General Frank Miller shook his head. He commanded Earth's ground forces and believed in strength above all else. We need to build more ships. Bigger guns. Better armor. Diplomacy won't stop another attack. Cross looked at both of them. We'll do both. Claire, you start reaching out to anyone who might listen. Frank, you start building. I want 50 new warships within a year. That's impossible, someone said. Then make it possible, Cross replied. Because if the Valiant's data is right, those Zalkar will be back. And next time, they'll bring more ships. He turned to another screen where a young woman's face appeared. Lieutenant Commander Amy Watson ran the Stealth and Reconnaissance Division. Her ships were small and fast, designed to slip in and out of enemy territory without being seen. Watson, I need you to find out everything you can about the Zalkar. Where they live, how many ships they have, what they're planning. Take the Shadow Runner and get me answers. Watson nodded. She looked excited rather than scared. I'll need a linguist, someone who can decode their language. Take Dr. Greg Foster. He's been studying the Zalkar communications since the data arrived. And take Joey Martinez as your pilot. He's the best we have. 3 days later, the Shadow Runner left Earth's orbit. It was painted black and covered in special materials that absorbed sensor beams instead of reflecting them. To most detection systems, it was invisible. To the eye, it was just another patch of darkness in an already dark universe. Watson sat in the command chair and watched stars slide past the view screen. Beside her, Joey worked the controls with easy confidence. He was a short man with quick hands and quicker reflexes. Behind them, Greg hunched over a computer, studying Zalkar grammar and syntax. How long until we reach their territory? Watson asked. 4 weeks, Joey said. We're taking the long route to avoid detection. 4 weeks of flying through empty space. 4 weeks of waiting and wondering. Watson spent the time training, exercising, and studying everything they knew about the Zalkar. It wasn't much. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Captain John Pierce and the survivors of the Valiant were treated like heroes. Parades were held in their honor. News channels interviewed them constantly. Children wore costumes that looked like their uniforms. Pierce hated every minute of it. He had lost 14 people. 14 names he would remember for the rest of his life. 14 families who would never see their loved ones again. That wasn't heroism. That was survival. That was luck. But Admiral Cross had other plans for him. Pierce was promoted to Commodore and given command of a new ship. The USSC Defiant was being built specifically to fight the Zalkar. It was bigger than the Valiant, with better shields and more powerful weapons. It was humanity's answer to the alien threat. Lisa Grant would be his first officer again. She was brilliant and steady. Exactly what he needed. Kate Morrison was put in charge of designing the engines for the entire Defiant-class program. If anyone could make ships that could outrun the Zalkar, it was her. 6 weeks after leaving Earth, the Shadow Runner reached Zalkar space. Watson ordered the crew to stay quiet and move slowly. They drifted through the outer systems, scanning and listening. What they found was terrifying. 53 warships, Greg said, his voice barely a whisper, even though no one could hear them. Where are they going? Joey asked. Watson knew before Greg finished running the calculations. Earth. But there was more. As they watched and listened, Greg intercepted communications between the Zalkar ships. He worked day and night to translate them, and what he learned was valuable. The Zalkar weren't just angry about losing 3 ships. They were humiliated. In their culture, losing to an inferior species was the worst possible shame. They were gathering this massive fleet not just to destroy Earth's defenses, but to make an example. They planned to bombard human cities until humanity begged for mercy. We need to get this information back, Watson said. Earth needs to know what's coming. But before they could leave, the sensors picked up something unexpected. A small ship was broadcasting a distress signal on an old frequency. It wasn't Zalkar. It was something else. Should we investigate? Joey asked. Watson thought about it. Their mission was to gather intelligence and return home. But if there was another species out here, one that might be friendly, Earth needed to know that too. Change course. Let's see who needs help. They found the ship drifting near a dead moon. It was damaged, leaking air, and its engines were cold. Watson ordered Joey to pull alongside. She suited up and crossed over through the airlock. Inside, she found 3 aliens. They were insect-like, with multiple arms and large compound eyes. They were weak from lack of oxygen, but still alive. Watson activated her translator and tried to communicate. The aliens called themselves Vryn. They were rebels, fighting against Zalkar control. Their people had been conquered 200 years ago and forced to serve the Dominion. They mined minerals, built ships, and died in Zalkar wars. But some Vryn refused to accept slavery. They fought back in small ways, sabotaging equipment and hiding resources. The leader of this group translated his name as Keeper of Hope. He was old by Vryn standards, his exoskeleton scarred from decades of fighting. When he learned that Watson was human, his eyes widened. You are the ones who fought at Kepler 442, the ones who destroyed 3 Zalkar ships. You know about that? Watson asked, surprised. Everyone knows. The story spread through all the slave worlds. A young species that refused to bow. A species that fought and won. Keeper of Hope made a gesture that might have been respect. You have given us something we had almost lost. You have given us hope. Watson brought the 3 Vryn aboard the Shadow Runner. Greg treated their injuries while Keeper of Hope shared everything he knew about the Zalkar. He told them about weak points in their ships, about their battle tactics, about the pride and arrogance that made them predictable. In exchange, Watson made a promise. If humanity survives this war, we will help free your people. We will not let the Zalkar keep you enslaved. Keeper of Hope touched her hand with one of his many fingers. Then, we will help you survive. I will contact the other resistance cells. When the Zalkar attack Earth, we will strike at their supply lines. We will create chaos in their rear. It is all we can do, but we will do it. The Shadow Runner returned to Earth 3 weeks later. Watson went straight to Admiral Cross with her report. She showed him the fleet numbers, the invasion plans, and the Zalkar battle tactics. She also told him about the Vryn and their offer of help. Cross listened to everything without interrupting. When she finished, he stood and walked to the window. Outside, construction crews were working around the clock to finish the new warships. The Defiant was nearly complete, its hull gleaming in the reflected light of Earth. 53 ships, Cross said quietly. We'll have 8 finished warships by the time they arrive. Maybe 30 converted civilian vessels. We're outnumbered 6 to 1. Yes, sir, Watson said. And you think we can win? Watson thought about John Pierce and the crew of the Valiant. She thought about Keeper of Hope and the Vryn rebels. She thought about every person on Earth who would fight to protect their home. I think we have to try, she said. Cross turned to face her. He looked old and tired, but his eyes were hard. Then we'll try. And if we fail, we'll make sure they remember us. We'll make sure every species in this galaxy knows that humanity doesn't go quietly. He activated the command channel that reached every military base on Earth and every ship in orbit. This is Admiral Cross. As of now, we are on war footing. The Zalkar are coming. They want to break us, to make us slaves, to erase us from the stars. We will not let that happen. Every person, every resource, every ship we have, will be ready when they arrive. We will meet them at the edge of our system. We will fight them in the dark between worlds, and we will show them what humanity is capable of. Across Earth, people heard the message and understood. This was it. This was the moment that would define their species. They would either stand and fight, or they would kneel and die. They chose to stand. In shipyards around the planet, workers doubled their shifts. Engineers solved problems they had thought impossible. Volunteers lined up to serve on civilian vessels that would be converted into warships. Everyone wanted to be part of the fight. Commodore Pierce stood on the bridge of the Defiant and watched Earth grow smaller behind them. Lisa was at his side. Kate was in engineering, making sure every system was perfect. Around them, 7 other new warships took formation. Think we're ready? Lisa asked. Pierce looked at his crew. They were scared. They were uncertain. But they were determined. They were human. We'd better be, he said, because ready or not, they're coming. The Zalkar fleet arrived exactly when Amy Watson predicted they would. Admiral Cross stood in the command center deep beneath Earth's surface and watched the sensors light up with contact markers. 53 hostile ships, each one a killing machine that had conquered a dozen worlds. They emerged from faster-than-light travel, in perfect formation, their weapons already charging. On the surface and in orbit, billions of people looked up at the stars and wondered if this would be humanity's last day. The human fleet waited near Neptune, 4 billion kilometers from Earth. Cross had made the decision to fight here rather than near the homeworld. If they lost close to Earth, debris and nuclear fire would rain down on the planet. Better to die far away, buying time for evacuation ships to flee with whoever they could save. Commodore John Pierce stood on the bridge of the Defiant and counted the enemy ships on his display. The numbers were not good. 8 human warships against 53 Zalkar vessels. The converted civilian ships would help, but they were fragile and poorly armed. This was going to be brutal. Open a channel to all ships, Cross ordered from Earth. His voice would reach every human vessel in the fleet. This is Admiral Cross. Today, we face an enemy that believes we are weak. They think we will break. They think we will run. But they are wrong. We are humans. We survived ice ages and plagues. We climbed out of caves and built cities. We reached for the stars and claimed them. Today we show the galaxy what that means. Today we fight not just for ourselves, but for every species that has ever been crushed under the Zalkar boot. Make them bleed. Make them remember. Make them fear us. The human ships responded with a thunder of acknowledgments. Every captain, every crew member, everyone knew what was at stake. The Zalkar fleet began to advance. They moved slowly, confidently, like wolves closing in on trapped prey. Their commander was Supreme War Leader Thakvar, the most decorated warrior in their empire. He had conquered 15 systems and never lost a battle. To him, this was not war. This was extermination. Pierce divided his forces according to the plan they had made. His 8 warships would form the main battle line and engage the enemy head-on. Captain Nicole Barnes would take 5 converted freighters and circle around Neptune's moon, Triton, trying to hit the Zalkar from the side. Commander Ron Carter would hide 15 ships in Neptune's ring system, waiting for the right moment to strike. All ships, advance, Pierce ordered. Full speed. Close the distance. The Defiant and her sister ships accelerated toward the Zalkar fleet. The gap between them shrank rapidly. 10,000 kilometers. 5,000. 2,000. The Zalkar opened fire first. Plasma beams cut through the darkness, so bright they hurt to look at. The beams crossed the distance in an eye blink and slammed into the human shields. 2 frigates at the edge of the formation exploded immediately, torn apart by the sheer power of the alien weapons. Shields holding, Lisa Grant reported from her station. Down to 70% from that one hit. Return fire, Pierce ordered. All ships, weapons free. The human railguns opened up. Solid metal slugs launched at a fraction of light speed. They lacked the raw power of plasma weapons, but they were accurate and cheap to fire. The Defiant's main guns could fire 20 times before the Zalkar recharged for their next shot. The slugs hammered into the Zalkar shields. Most were absorbed harmlessly, but the constant barrage was starting to show effect. Shield generators overheated. Power systems strained to keep up with the demand. Pierce changed the Defiant's course suddenly, veering left while ordering the ship beside him to veer right. The Zalkar targeting computers were built for straight-line battles. They expected enemies to hold formation and trade fire like civilized warriors. Instead, the human ships scattered and dodged, making themselves harder to hit. One Zalkar plasma beam missed the Defiant by meters and hit empty space. Another was absorbed by the shields of a converted cargo hauler that had been reinforced with extra armor. The humans were dancing through the battle, using every trick they knew to stay alive. Lieutenant Commander Sam Rogers commanded the destroyer USS Ranger. He saw a plasma beam about to hit the Defiant's weaker rear shields. Without hesitation, he turned his ship directly into the path of the beam. It hit the Ranger's forward section and burned through the hull like a knife through paper. Rogers had 5 seconds before his ship exploded. He used them to transmit one last message. "Give them hell, Commodore." The Ranger vanished in a ball of fire, but the Defiant survived. Pierce felt the loss like a physical blow. Sam had been a friend, a good officer, a man with a family waiting back on Earth. Now, he was gone. But there was no time to grieve. The battle was just beginning. Captain Nicole Barnes made her move. She had taken her squadron behind Triton and used the moon's gravity to accelerate them to incredible speeds. Now they came screaming around the moon's edge and into the Zalkar formation from the side. The aliens were caught completely by surprise. Their shields were facing forward, toward the main human fleet. Barnes concentrated all her fire on one Zalkar cruiser's engines. The civilian ships she commanded were carrying mining lasers, industrial cutters, anything that could damage a ship. Together, they burned through the cruiser's armor and ruptured its fuel tanks. The explosion took out another Zalkar ship that was too close. 2 kills for the price of 1. Thakvar roared in fury aboard his command ship. These humans were fighting like insects, stinging from every direction, refusing to stand and die properly. It was beneath the dignity of war. It was dishonorable, but it was working. All ships, Titan formation. Thakvar ordered. Focus fire on the human flagship. Crush their leader, and the rest will break. The Zalkar fleet turned its full attention to the Defiant. 30 ships began charging their weapons. 30 plasma beams would fire simultaneously at one target. Nothing could survive that. Pierce saw it coming. Lisa, Divert everything to forward shields. Kate, I need you to buy me 10 seconds. In engineering, Kate Morrison was already pushing buttons faster than her crew could follow. She shut down life support in empty sections. She pulled power from the gravity generators. She even cut the engines for a moment. Every watt of power the ship could generate went to the shields. The Zalcar fired. 30 beams of superheated plasma converged on the Defiant. The ship's shields lit up brighter than a star. Alarms screamed. The smell of burning circuits filled the bridge. Lisa's console exploded and threw her backward. Blood ran down her face from a cut on her forehead, but the shields held. Barely. They were at 2%, and failing, but they had held for just long enough. Kate brought the engines back online. The Defiant shot forward at maximum speed, diving down relative to the Zalcar formation. Pierce was using the third dimension, something the Zalcar rarely considered. Space was not a flat battlefield. It had depth. The human ships followed the Defiant's lead, scattering above and below the Zalcar fleet. The aliens had to split their fire, trying to track targets that were now everywhere at once. Commander Ron Carter saw his opening. The Zalcar formation had gaps in it now, holes where ships were turning to face multiple directions. He brought his 15 ships out of Neptune's rings at full speed. These were not warships. They were passenger liners and cargo haulers, freighters and mining vessels. Some of them were so old they should have been scrapped years ago, but each one carried human crew members who volunteered for this, knowing they probably would not survive. Commander Brett Sullivan was aboard one of the converted passenger liners. He had spent the last 3 weeks training civilians in basic combat operations. Now, he led them into battle. Remember, he told his crew, we don't have to destroy them. We just have to hurt them. Aim for sensors, weapons, anything vulnerable. If we're going down, we take them with us. The civilian ships hit the Zalcar formation like a hammer. They fired missiles at point-blank range. They used tractor beams to drag enemy fighters into crossfire. One cargo hauler, its engines failing, rammed directly into a Zalcar destroyer and detonated its own reactor on purpose. Half the civilian ships died in the first 2 minutes. But they bought time for the military vessels to regroup. They created chaos in the Zalcar ranks. They proved that humans would sacrifice everything to protect their home. Takvar watched his perfect formation dissolve into a confused mess. Ships were colliding with each other. Crews were panicking. This was not how battles were supposed to go. The enemy was supposed to lose with honor, not throw themselves at you like mad animals. Reform. Reform. He screamed at his commanders. Show these mammals what discipline means. The Zalcar began to pull their formation back together. They had taken losses, more than expected, but they still outnumbered the humans. Badly. Takvar ordered his ships to form a tight sphere, shields overlapping, covering each other's weak points. It was a defensive formation, something the Zalcar rarely needed, but it was effective. The human attacks could no longer find easy targets. Pierce saw the problem immediately. The Zalcar had adjusted to human tactics. Now they were fighting smart, using their superior numbers and technology properly. If this continued, the humans would be ground down through sheer attrition. Admiral, Pierce said over the command channel to Cross, we need to break their formation. If they stay grouped like that, we can't win. Cross was watching the battle from Earth, seeing everything on sensors and video feeds. He was calculating, thinking, weighing options. Every choice meant lives. Every decision could save Earth or doom it. The command ship, Cross said. It's in the center of their formation. If we can kill it, their coordination falls apart. To reach it, we'd have to fly straight through their entire fleet, Pierce said. Yes, Cross agreed. It is. But it's our only chance. Can you do it? Pierce looked around his bridge. Lisa had a medical patch on her forehead but was back at her station. Kate's voice came through the intercom, reporting that shields were back to 30%. Paul Hayes was at weapons, ready to fire. The crew was battered and tired, but they were still fighting. "We can do it," Pierce said. "We'll need support. Every ship fires at one point in their formation at the same time. Create a hole. We'll fly through it." Cross nodded even though Pierce could not see it. "Understood. All ships, prepare for coordinated strike. Target coordinates being transmitted now. On my mark, everyone fires together. We're going to punch through and kill their leader." Across the human fleet, crews prepared for what might be their last attack. They loaded every weapon. They diverted every bit of power they could spare. They said silent prayers to whatever gods they believed in, and they waited for the order to charge. Admiral Cross counted down from 10. His voice was calm, steady, like he was announcing dinner rather than ordering men and women to their deaths. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Fire. Every human ship in the fleet fired at the exact same moment. Railgun slugs, missiles, lasers, everything they had left. All of it focused on one single point in the Zalkar formation. The combined firepower was massive, overwhelming, more than any one shield generator could handle. The Zalkar shields at that point flickered, strained, and collapsed. For 3 seconds, there was a hole in their formation. "Now," Pierce said. "Full speed, follow me." The Defiant's engines roared to maximum power. The ship shot forward like a bullet, aimed straight at the gap. Behind it came 3 destroyers. The USSC Phoenix, the USSC Valor, and the USSC Freedom. 4 ships, charging into the teeth of the enemy fleet. The Zalkar realized what was happening too late. They turned their weapons toward the Defiant. But the human ships were already through the gap. Plasma beams hit empty space where the ships had been a second before. Kate Morrison was routing power from every system she could. Life support was at minimum. Gravity was failing in some sections. Even the lights were dimming. But the shields were as strong as she could make them, and the engines were pushed beyond their design limits. "We're taking fire from all sides," Lisa Grant reported. Her station was sparking and smoking, but she kept working. Shields, at 50%. 40. 30. The Phoenix took a direct hit. The destroyer's entire port side was ripped away. Atmosphere vented into space. The ship spun out of control and crashed into a Zalkar cruiser. Both vessels exploded together, crew members from 2 species dying in the same fire. Pierce felt the loss but kept his eyes forward. They were inside the Zalkar formation now, surrounded by enemy ships. Dead ahead was the command vessel. The Claw of Dominion. It was massive, easily 5 times the size of the Defiant. "Target their shield generators," Pierce ordered Paul Hayes. "The nodes on the side of the hull." Dr. Foster identified them from the intelligence data. "I see them," Hayes said. "But we can't get through those shields with what we have left." That was when Amy Watson made her choice. She was still out here in the Shadowrunner, watching the battle from stealth. Her crew wanted to help, wanted to fight, but the stealth ship had no real weapons. It was built for spying, not combat. All they could do was watch their friends die. Watson looked at Joey Martinez and Greg Foster. They looked back at her. No one said anything. They did not need to. They all knew what had to be done. "Drop the cloak," Watson said quietly. "Charge weapons. All power to forward guns." "Amy," Joey said, using her first name even though that was against regulations. "If we drop cloak, they'll see us. They'll kill us." "I know," Watson said. "That's the point. We draw their attention. The Defiant gets a shot. Do it." The Shadowrunner's cloak fell away. Suddenly the little stealth ship was visible to every sensor in the battle. It was like lighting a torch in a dark room. Every Zalkar ship saw it at once. Watson fired everything she had at the Claw of Dominion. The shots barely scratched the command ship's shields. But Supreme War Leader Thakvar saw the attack and was insulted by it. A tiny human ship dared to fire on his personal vessel. "All weapons," Thakvar snarled. "Destroy that insect." 20 Zalkar ships turned their weapons on the Shadowrunner. Watson had maybe 3 seconds before they fired. She used them to send one last message to Pierce. "Make it count, Commodore. Make them remember us." Then the Zalkar fired. The Shadowrunner disappeared in a storm of plasma. The ship broke apart, its hull melting under the heat. Watson managed to eject the escape pods at the last second. Joey and Greg were thrown clear. Watson stayed at the controls until the reactor overloaded. The Shadowrunner, what was left of it, slammed into the Claw of Dominion. The reactor detonation tore through 3 decks of the command ship. Fires erupted inside. The shields flickered. Pierce saw his chance. Paul, fire, everything. Now, the Defiance railguns spat metal at the exposed shield generators. The shots were perfect, precisely aimed, hitting exactly where they needed to. The shield generators exploded. The Claw of Dominion's shields failed in 2 sections. "Missiles," Pierce ordered. "Into the gap. Target the bridge." The last of the Defiance missiles launched. They crossed the distance in seconds and punched through the Claw's hull. They detonated inside the ship, ripping through corridors and command centers. Supreme War Leader Thakvar was on the bridge when the missiles hit. He had time to feel surprise, then rage, then nothing at all. The bridge collapsed around him. The greatest warrior in Zalkar history died without ever understanding how these primitive humans had beaten him. The Claw of Dominion began to list to one side. Its engines were failing. Escape pods started launching as the crew abandoned ship. Without their commander, the Zalkar fleet fell into chaos. Different ship captains started giving different orders. Some wanted to keep fighting. Others wanted to retreat. A few wanted to rescue survivors from the Claw. They had no unified strategy anymore. "All ships, press the attack." Admiral Cross ordered from Earth. "Do not let them regroup." The human fleet, what was left of it, surged forward. They were battered and bleeding, down to less than 20 functional ships. But they had momentum now. They had hope. Captain Nicole Barnes brought her remaining ships around for another pass. Commander Ron Carter's civilian vessels, those that still flew, charged back into the fight. Every human ship concentrated fire on the confused Zalkar vessels. The Valor and Freedom, still fighting beside the Defiant, targeted the Zalkar cruisers closest to them. The Freedom took a fatal hit and exploded, but not before destroying 2 enemy ships. The tide had turned. The Zalkar were not prepared for this. They had never lost a commander in battle before. They had no procedures for it. No backup plans. Their rigid military structure, their strength when united, became a weakness when coordination failed. One by one, Zalkar ships began to retreat. They jumped to faster than light speed and fled, abandoning their comrades. The fleet that had been 53 ships was now less than 20. And those 20 were scattered and panicking. Pierce saw one ship trying to escape. It was damaged, moving slowly, shields down. He recognized it from the battle at Kepler 442. War Master Krevthor's ship. The Zalkar commander who had first threatened Earth was trying to run. "Target that ship," Pierce ordered. "Do not let it escape." But before the Defiant could fire, 3 Zalkar ships moved to protect Krevthor. They formed a screen, absorbing the hits meant for their commander. They died, so he could escape. Krevthor's ship jumped away. Pierce slammed his fist on the armrest of his chair. That Zalkar would be back someday, with hate in his heart and revenge on his mind. But that was a problem for another day. The remaining Zalkar ships saw their commander escape and took it as permission to retreat. Within minutes, the battle was over. The Zalkar fleet, what little remained of it, was gone. The human ships drifted in space, surrounded by debris and bodies. Of the 8 warships that started the battle, only the Defiant and the Valor remained. Of the 30 civilian vessels, 7 were still functional. More than 4,000 humans were dead, but Earth was safe. Humanity had won. Pierce sat in his command chair and felt every year of his age. Lisa was beside him, her face pale beneath the blood and dirt. Kate's voice came through from engineering, reporting critical damage to almost every system. The Defiant was barely holding together. "Get me Admiral Cross," Pierce said. Cross appeared on the screen. He looked as tired as Pierce felt. Behind him, people in the command center were cheering and crying and hugging each other. But Cross just looked at Pierce with understanding in his eyes. "It's over," Cross said. "You did it. You saved Earth. We lost so many," Pierce said. "We lost heroes," Cross agreed. "Every single one of them. And we will remember them. But John, listen to me. We won. Against impossible odds, against an enemy that has never been beaten. We won. Do you understand what that means?" Pierce did not answer. He was thinking about Sam Rogers and the Ranger, about Commander Lucy Kim and the Tempest, about Amy Watson and the Shadowrunner, about all the names that would be carved on memorials and spoken in quiet remembrance. "It means hope," Cross continued. "Right now, across the galaxy, species that have lived under Zalkar rule are hearing about this battle. They're hearing that someone stood up and won. We've given them something they haven't had in generations." In engineering, Kate was directing repair crews to the worst damage. They were plugging hull breaches with whatever they could find. They were rerouting power through backup systems. They were keeping the Defiant alive through determination and improvisation. On the bridge, Lisa was already pulling together casualty reports. She read through the names, each one like a knife to the heart. She had known these people. She had eaten with them, laughed with them, depended on them. Paul Hayes was staring at his weapons console. It was dark now, drained of power. He had fired every shot the Defiant carried. He wondered how many Zalkar he had killed. He wondered if it mattered. Across the human fleet, similar scenes were playing out. Crews too exhausted to celebrate. Captains reading lists of the dead. Engineers performing miracles to keep ships functional long enough to get home. And floating in escape pods throughout the battlefield, survivors waited for rescue. Joey Martinez and Greg Foster were among them, alive by pure luck and Amy Watson's sacrifice. They watched the stars and thought about their friend who had given her life so they could live. Back on Earth, the celebrations had already begun. People poured into the streets. They hugged strangers. They looked up at the sky knowing that somewhere up there, brave men and women had saved them all. But those brave men and women were not celebrating. They were counting their dead and trying to keep their broken ships together long enough to make it home. Pierce finally spoke to Admiral Cross. "What happens now?" "Now we rebuild," Cross said. "We make sure this never happens again. And we prepare for when the Zalkar return." "Because they will return, John. This isn't over." "I know," Pierce said. "But we proved something today. We proved we can fight. We proved we can win." "Yes," Cross agreed. "We carved our name into history today. Into legend. The galaxy will remember this battle. And they will remember humanity." The Defiant began its long journey back to Earth, limping through space on damaged engines. Around it, the other surviving ships formed up. They looked like they had been through hell. Because they had. The news traveled faster than the Defiant could fly home. Within days, every species in the galaxy had heard about the Battle of Neptune. The story spread through official channels and secret networks, through merchant gossip and resistance whispers. Humanity, the young species barely capable of faster-than-light travel, had defeated the Zalkar Dominion. They had destroyed over 30 warships and killed Supreme War Leader Thukvar himself. They had done what no one else had managed in 2,000 years. The Vryn were the first to react. Keeper of Hope gathered the resistance cells and broadcast a message to every Vryn world, both free and enslaved. The message was simple. If humans could fight the Zalkar and win, so could they. Within a week, uprisings erupted on 4 Zalkar-controlled planets. Vryn workers seized weapons factories. Vryn soldiers turned on their masters. 2 worlds successfully drove out their occupiers. The Zalkar, already reeling from their defeat at Neptune, could not respond with their usual overwhelming force. Admiral Henry Cross was promoted to Fleet Admiral and became humanity's voice in the growing alliance of free species. His first official act was to meet with Keeper of Hope and formalize the alliance between humans and Vryn. They met on a neutral station, both accompanied by guards who watched each other warily. But when Cross and Keeper of Hope shook hands, or rather when Cross shook one of Keeper's many appendages, the image was broadcast across dozens of worlds. 2 species, united against tyranny. "We owe you a debt," Keeper of Hope said through the translator. "You gave us hope when we had none. You proved that the Zalkar could be beaten. You helped us survive," Cross replied. "Your intelligence, your diversionary attacks. We could not have won without you." The alliance grew quickly. The Quintar, a merchant species, approached humanity with offers of trade and technology. They had stayed neutral in most conflicts, but the Battle of Neptune impressed them. Any species that could fight like that was worth doing business with. The Halon, peaceful explorers who valued knowledge above all else, sent a delegation to Earth. They wanted to learn everything about humans. How did such a young species develop such effective tactics? What drove them to fight so fiercely? Even the Torvan, reclusive miners who rarely spoke to outsiders, reached out. They had suffered under Zalkar taxation and conscription for generations. Now, they saw a chance for freedom. Within 2 years, the Free Species Coalition was official. 12 species had joined, each bringing their own strengths. The Vryn provided soldiers and intelligence. The Quintar offered ships and supplies. The Halon shared scientific knowledge. Together, they were stronger than any single species could be. But strength came at a cost. The memorials had to be built. Earth constructed the largest monument in orbit around Neptune, right where the battle had been fought. It was a massive ring of titanium and carbon, visible from millions of kilometers away. Etched into its surface were the names of every human who died in the battle. 4,217 names. The dedication ceremony drew representatives from every coalition species. They came to honor not just the human dead, but the moment when the galaxy began to change. Families of the fallen gathered in ships near the monument. Some touched the screens that showed their loved ones' names. Some cried quietly. Some stood in proud silence. Lisa Grant was there, now an admiral herself. She had taken over the Defiance reconstruction program and turned it into a massive expansion of Earth's fleet. Under her guidance, humanity went from 8 warships to over 100 in 5 years. Kate Morrison spoke at the ceremony. She had become the chief engineer for all human space vessels, pushing technology forward faster than anyone thought possible. Her engines were now faster than Zalkar designs. Her ships could outmaneuver anything in space. "We remember them," Kate said. Her voice carried across every ship and station. "We remember their courage. We remember their sacrifice. And we honor them by never forgetting what they fought for. They fought so we could be free, so we could reach for the stars without fear, so we could build a galaxy where no one lives under tyranny." Joey Martinez and Greg Foster were in the crowd, both of them wearing their dress uniforms. They had survived the battle in the Shadowrunner's escape pod and been rescued by a Vryn ship. Now they worked together in Earth's intelligence division, coordinating with resistance groups across the galaxy. They stood before Amy Watson's name on the memorial. Neither of them spoke. What was there to say? She had saved their lives and countless others. She had given everything so humanity could survive. John Pierce, now promoted to admiral, gave the final speech. He looked older, gray-haired, and lined with care, but his eyes were still sharp. 5 years ago, we met an enemy that thought we were weak They thought we would surrender or die quietly. They were wrong. Today, we honor those who proved them wrong. We honor the brave souls who flew into battle knowing they might not return. We honor the civilians who volunteered to fight in converted cargo ships. We honor every single person who stood up and said, "Not today. Not ever." He paused and looked at the monument, at all those names gleaming in the light of distant stars. But this memorial is not just for humans. It is for everyone who fights for freedom. For the Vryn who rose up against their masters. For the Quintar, who risk their ships to help refugees. For every species that refuses to bow. This monument says that tyranny can be defeated. It says that hope is stronger than fear. It says that together, we are unstoppable. The ceremony ended with a moment of silence. Across the human fleet, across coalition ships, across every vessel in attendance, people stood and remembered. The Zalkar Dominion, meanwhile, was fracturing. The defeat at Neptune had shaken their entire society. Supreme War Leader Thakvar's death left a power vacuum that different factions fought to fill. Civil war erupted in their home system. War Master Krevthor survived, and eventually seized power through a combination of military force and political maneuvering. He became the new Supreme War Leader. But his position was weak. Half the Dominion wanted revenge against humanity. The other half wanted to focus on holding their remaining territory. Krevthor chose revenge. He swore a blood oath to destroy Earth and every human in the galaxy. But when he tried to gather a new fleet, he found it difficult. Ships were needed to put down rebellions on a dozen worlds. Resources were stretched thin. The Dominion that had seemed invincible was now struggling just to survive. In secret, some Zalkar began to question everything they had been taught. These dissenters were few and carefully hidden, but they existed. They had seen humans fight with honor despite being hopelessly outnumbered. They had seen entire crews sacrifice themselves to save others. It made them wonder if maybe strength was not the only virtue worth having. The story of the Battle of Neptune took on a life of its own. It was told and retold, changing slightly with each version but keeping the core truth. On Vryn worlds, parents told their children about the fire spirits of Sol who refused to be conquered. In Quintar markets, merchants used the phrase, "to fight like a human," to mean fighting against impossible odds. The Halon composed an epic poem about the battle. It was 3 hours long and performed with musical accompaniment. Claire Hughes, now Earth's permanent ambassador to the Coalition, attended the first public performance. She did not understand all the words, but she understood the emotion. The poem spoke of courage and sacrifice, of young species teaching old ones that freedom was worth dying for. Even in neutral territories where coalition influence was weak, the story spread. Spacers in bars told about the day the Zalkar ran from battle. Pilots shared videos of the fight, poor quality recordings taken from long distance but showing the impossible maneuvers human ships performed. The legend grew with each telling. 10 years after the battle, a Zalkar military recording was intercepted by human intelligence. It was a training session for new Zalkar warriors. The instructor was showing them footage of the Battle of Neptune. "This is what happens when you underestimate an enemy," the instructor said. His translation came through in cold, precise tones. The humans were primitives. They should have died quickly, but they used tactics we had never seen. They sacrificed themselves without hesitation. They fought for their homeworld with a ferocity that matches our own warrior code. The instructor paused the recording at the moment the Shadowrunner rammed the claw of Dominion. This human commander chose to die rather than let her comrades fail. She knew she would not survive. She did it anyway. That is the kind of enemy we face now. Not weak prey that scatters before us, but warriors who will die to protect their own. The recording ended with a warning. Never again assume humans are easy targets. They have proven they belong among the warrior races of the galaxy. When that recording reached Earth, people had mixed reactions. Some were proud that even enemies respected them now. Others worried that respect might make the Zalkar fight harder next time. But everyone agreed on one thing. The galaxy had changed. Humanity was no longer unknown. They had made their mark. 15 years after the battle, John Pierce was old and ready to retire. He had commanded fleets, trained new officers, and helped build a military that could defend Earth against any threat. Now he wanted to rest. On his last day in uniform, he visited the Neptune Memorial one final time. He stood alone in a shuttle, looking at all those names. "I hope we made it worth it," he said to the empty space. "I hope you'd be proud of what we built." A message came through on his communicator. It was from Admiral Cross. Even older now, but still working. "John, you should see this. The Torvin just finished a survey of the Neptune battlefield. They found something." Pierce authorized the data transfer. His screen filled with an image of the debris field. Most of it had been cleared away years ago. But some pieces remained. Too small, or too far out to be worth recovering. Among those pieces, the Torvan had found an intact data core from a Zalkar ship. When they analyzed it, they discovered personal logs from Zalkar crew members. The logs had been written during and after the battle. One log, written by a young Zalkar warrior, included this passage: "Today I saw something I cannot explain. The human ships were inferior. Their weapons were weak. Their shields were fragile. By every measure, they should have died quickly, and we should have moved on to destroy their homeworld. But they did not die quickly. They fought, like I have only read about in the ancient tales of our people. They fought like fire spirits, like demons, like the heroes from stories we tell children. How do you defeat an enemy that refuses to accept defeat? How do you break warriors who are already broken but keep fighting anyway?" The log continued. "Supreme War Leader Thakvar is dead. Our mighty fleet is scattered. We are retreating from a species we had never heard of until a few months ago. And I find myself thinking strange thoughts. If they fought this hard to defend their home, what would they do to protect their allies? What would they do if they decided to bring war to us? For the first time in my life, I am afraid. Not of death. Death is honorable. I am afraid of what we have awakened." Pierce read the log 3 times. Then, he sent it to every captain in the fleet, with one message attached: "This is why we fight. Not for conquest. Not for glory. But so that no one ever again makes the mistake of thinking humanity is weak. We carved our name into their legends. Let us make sure it stays there." 20 years after the battle, the galaxy was fundamentally different. The Free Species Coalition controlled a third of known space. The Zalkar Dominion was reduced to half its former size. Dozens of species lived in freedom who had been enslaved for generations. Children on Earth and a dozen other worlds grew up hearing stories about the Battle of Neptune. They learned the names of the ships. They memorized the tactics. Some of them joined the military hoping to be like the heroes they heard about. In Coalition space, the phrase, "Remember Neptune," became a rallying cry. It meant stand firm against tyranny. It meant fight for freedom, no matter the cost. It meant that even the smallest, weakest species could change the galaxy if they had courage. The monument around Neptune grew over the years. Other species added their own sections, honoring their fallen from their own fights for freedom. It became a place of pilgrimage, where people came to remember and to be inspired. And somewhere, in secret places throughout the galaxy, resistance groups planning to fight their own tyrants whispered to each other about humanity, about the species that said no when saying yes would have been easier, about the battle that proved freedom was worth fighting for. The legend had been carved into the stars themselves, and it would burn there forever, a light in the darkness, showing others that tyranny could be defeated and hope could triumph over fear. The battle that carved humanity's name into alien legends was over, but the legend itself would never die.